Josh Pate's playoff expansion criticism. Josh Pate has been pretty vocal with his criticism, and I know Zach wanted to talk about this. So, Zach, why don't you go ahead and summarize for us what Josh Pate has been talking about over there?
Yeah, and I think there might be disagreement here. I love Josh Pate, and so I think when he speaks, I really appreciate a lot of the wisdom he drops, and I think when he speaks, he brings a lot of knowledge, but sometimes I think he goes maybe a little too far. And so one of the things he was talking about in his playoff criticism was this idea that the wrong people are making decisions about college football. He's saying he's afraid that the regular season is going to be diminished, and that the people that have sold us on playoffs and even further playoff expansion, that they are selling us the wrong things, and that they're selling playoff expansion to people who originally never wanted a postseason and never wanted a true champion. And so I think best summarizes what he was talking about, is particularly the wrong people are making the decisions, and that they have influenced us into thinking we want something that we actually didn't want.
That's very interesting. Mike, let's kick it to you first. In terms of the playoff expansion, people making the decisions, obviously kind of on the line of what Josh Pate is talking about. Do you think there's something seriously wrong with college football right now?
Well, yes and no. I mean, I do think, I shouldn't say yes. I think college football was definitely inevitably going this way. I mean, it's kind of been, I would say it's been in the writing for the last 20 years. I mean, you could argue well into the BCS period that we knew we were going into a playoff, and then eventually going into a playoff, and eventually it was going to be an expanded playoff. I think where I get where some of his points are, I think, and just from listening to some of the videos I listened to today, is I do maybe think that I think he's a little concerned maybe on some of the media, are they pushing maybe a little too much and stuff like that? But, these brands, I mean, ESPN, Fox, I mean, this is where all the money is at. So, I mean, they're going to do what makes them money. And I mean, I don't think there's a way that you can argue past that, is that, they feel like that this is what fans want. And when you've seen over the last couple years, I mean, college football has supplanted every professional sport in this country outside of the NFL. I mean, it's a clear 1 and 2 who what the top two sports are, and that's NFL and college football. And there's not really a close to beating out college football right now. So I think we're a football country. I mean, there's no way to argue that, and that's what the people want. And I mean, I've been nervous about what some of these changes could be. I mean, I started really religiously watching it back in '95, and so I've been there for a while now. So I get where a lot of these people are coming from when they, a lot of the traditions have went, away. But I don't know. I'm to the point. I think that you got to try to balance it as best as possible. But I do agree with him in parts, and I disagree with him in parts.
Yeah, it makes sense. I want to go to the chat real fast and get some opinions before we go to SD here. Brian, please let us know what your thoughts are in the chat. We like to vocalize what people are saying, so that way we can give our thoughts and also just add to the conversation as well. Brian is telling us, without a playoff, championships are arbitrary. A playoff is the only way to determine a true champion. I agree with this. I think that, we look at some of the AP polls and things like that in the history. I mean, and one of the most notable ones for Ohio State fans and Michigan fans is the 1997, and Nebraska fans as well, where Michigan had basically every single poll except for one that Nebraska had. And it's like, what is a Nebraska 1/10 champion, and Michigan is a 9/10 or something like that? It's one of those things. With a playoff system now, it's much more easier to be able to actually crown the champion. SD, going to you on kind of the Josh Pate thought here. Do you agree with him that there is something seriously wrong with college football, either into the decision makers or what's going on with playoff expansion right now?
Normally I'm something of a Josh Pate hater. I find his poorly written Coen Brothers side character shtick a little annoying. But the blind squirrel found a nut on this one. The root of the problem with all of this is that the people in charge of college football could not care less about college football. They couldn't care less about the rivalries. They couldn't care less about the traditions. They couldn't care less about anything other than numbers on a spreadsheet. Okay. And, I'm excited for these new Big Ten teams to come in. I think it's going to make football more interesting. But, I'm also a college graduate. I can't help but think of the track and field athletes who are going to have to travel across the country on a Tuesday night to compete for a Wednesday meet. I mean, this is ridiculous. The people in charge do not care about college athletics. They care about numbers on a spreadsheet. It's only going to get worse. The NCAA is completely toothless. Anytime they try to hand down any ruling, state AG step in and sue and win. Congress has no interest in giving the NCAA an antitrust exemption. So it's just going to keep spiraling out of control until the entire system collapses. So, that may be a doomer opinion, but I don't really see a way that the genie can go back in the bottle here. I mean, the Pac-12 isn't coming back, right? We're not going back to these regional conferences. So we need to figure out how to make this the most sustainable product it can be. And, this 14-team playoff that's being floated is ridiculous. I don't like it. I think it's bullshit. And I'm not sure what else to do. I agree with the structure of the playoff. I think 12 teams is great. I think the quarterfinals should also be home games for the top seeded team. I think that's probably going to change once these teams see these home environments for these first round playoff games. But yeah, the people in charge of college football don't care about college football. And that's the main issue. They're not thinking about what's best for the sport. They're thinking about what's best for shareholder value. And that's always going to be worse for the people involved and for the consumer.
Yeah, friend of the program, Jackson here. The playoff field should be 8 or 16. It shouldn't be at 12 or 14. I agree. And SD, I agree with a lot, basically everything you said too. It doesn't make any sense to have a 14-team playoff. I mean, you have these weird buys and things like that going on. I much rather prefer an 8-team playoff that actually has some seeding that's well structured on each side. Something that has been talked about. Josh Pate mentioned it a little bit, and it's something that I actually posted about because from what I've heard behind the scenes, this is kind of the way things are going, is that we're probably going to see the SEC and the Big Ten get to 20 to 24 teams each. They're probably both going to get there, pick from the Big 12 and the ACC to get there, and there will most likely be a 4-pod system in each conference, which will then create a kind of mini playoff, basically what you see in the NFL, where you have the NFC and the AFC on each side, and the champion of each will come into the middle and play for the national championship. Zach, your thoughts on that system? And like I said, Josh Pate mentioned it a little bit, but it was kind of scarce on that system and his thoughts on it as well. What were your thoughts?
Yeah, well, I think SD, I appreciate where you're going, because I think what you're talking about, and I think what we're all talking about, is that college football, I think, is fundamentally flawed. And I think part of the problem has been the landscape has shifted for so long from what it was to what it is now. So, I mean, I cover high school football in the falls and here in Pennsylvania. And I mean, you talk about regional rivalries, you talk about just knowing the local players, and like what's different about that versus major college football is that it's regional. It's all about communities. You're not talking about money. Certainly there are players that go on to major college for scholarships and whatnot, but like it's much more about community and tradition and local rivalries. Whereas college football has really shifted over the past 30, 40 years. And I think rather than addressing that shifting reality, as the product has become more popular and as more money has been thrown around, there's been it's been like Band-Aids that they've tried to stick on it. So you had the BCS to determine a champion, and then there was a flaw with the BCS. And then I think even as late as this past year, we saw the flaw of the 4-team playoff, which is Florida State. But what that really exposed was that college football went from a regional product, which was about school pride and amateurism, to really it's the minor league system for the NFL. Like, if we're really honest about what college football has become, and it's been branded as amateurism and pageantry and tradition. And there's certainly elements of that. I'm not trying to say that's all gone away, but that's not really the foundation of what it is anymore. We lost the foundation for that when we had the first $1 billion TV deal. So because of that, there are perpetual problems, because I think we often try to address college football as a regional product, that's a college product, when it hasn't been that in decades. And so I think what Josh Pate is trying to get at is that the wrong people are making decisions about college football. And I think part of the problem with that is that I think on one hand, I agree, because I think what we miss about college football is, like, we loved ESPN going on college campuses and Lee Corso putting on the mascot head and getting the local community riled up. But then you're getting national championship games with corporate sponsors and all that. And like, they're trying to mix two worlds that don't mix. And so I think Josh Pate's application, I can understand it. I don't agree with it. But I think the problem is more nuanced than just, well, do this one thing and then it's fixed. Rather, I think part of it is you have to recognize for what it's become. I think we're going to 2 conferences, just like the NFL, but it's the Big Ten and the SEC. I think we're going to the pods. And I think it's going to make a lot of people upset because it's not the college football we've grown up with. But I'm not sure we can go back to the college football we've grown up with.
No, we can't. But what we can do is we can make college football the best product for what it is now. Part of that is going to be classifying the athletes as employees. That's a major, major thing. That is going to grant a lot of latitude in reorganization, because right now schools are trying to have their cake and eat it too. They're not going to be able to do that. They're going to have to split the pie. This is just going to continue to spiral downwards. And the unintended consequences of continuing to fight against this could be cataclysmic for other student athletes, for campus life. This is, for a lot of schools, college football is the heartbeat. A lot, look at applications when a team wins a national championship. They skyrocket, right? Yep. Clemson's enrollment skyrocketed when they won that first national championship. Alabama, I visited Alabama pre-Nick Saban. It was a backwater hick town. You go to Tuscaloosa today, it's almost a metropolis. It's like college football drives so much, and we're not going to be taking care. We're not taking care of it. The people in charge aren't taking care of it. Right? When it goes to a national brand, they'll do the 48, 50 teams for a while, but then they're going to go, do we need Rutgers? Do we need Wake Forest? Ultimately it's just going to get trimmed and trimmed and trimmed until ultimately there's, 30 teams. And, I know for a fact, Michigan State's going to be on that chopping block at some point. So this is personal for me as an alumni of Michigan State, as a fan of Michigan State athletics. Like, this is super important that we stop going down, that we have to find another way to figure this out and make everyone happy, because this is unsustainable.
Yeah, and it brings you to the thought of, and I know Josh Pate has mentioned this, as have others, and I think, I if anybody's followed me on Twitter long enough, I'm not the biggest Josh Pate fan in the world. However, I do think that he makes some good points, and he does articulate them well in the way that he speaks, so I appreciate that. one point that he has made is that there needs to be some kind of commissioner for college football that is able to take care of all of these things. And I don't know who that would be. I don't know if that is an advisory board between the Big Ten and the SEC. I don't know if that is an athletic director swapping out every 3 or 4 years or something like that. I have no idea what that looks like. But to me, that would be what would make the most sense, is instead of letting these TV companies, Fox, ESPN, heck, even the CW is in college football right now. And instead of letting all of these TV networks figure this out, that we need somebody in charge who can actually care for the sport and make it what it's supposed to be. So, Mike, I'll kind of let you have the last word on this entire conversation, and we'll move on. What do you think?
I think that just going off a couple of things that what both the other two were saying, I actually do think that the Big Ten and the SEC are kind of trying to be proactive right now with all this stuff. It's actually, I think they could be a little bit more proactive, but I think it's the most proactive I've seen ever. College football, college sports, the NCAA, the conferences, all this in general. I mean, if you've been following this stuff for years, I mean, talk about kick the can down the road, over and over and over and over again. It's nice to see that, they are being a little bit more proactive. Athletes are going to get paid. I mean, they are going to become employees. I mean, anybody that understands the, U.S. court system, I mean, that is coming. I mean, the NCAA has not fared well at all in any of these court cases. I mean, hell, the last time they went in front of the Supreme Court, they lost 9-0. And if anybody who follows politics, that doesn't happen that much. So like that everybody can agree on, one thing. So the NCAA is going to be, the next time they go in front of the Supreme Court, it's probably not going to be a good thing at all for them. So I really do think the Big Ten and the SEC is trying to be proactive because they know that these are going to be employees. And I think that's kind of why they're trying to separate themselves a little bit from the pack, because I think they realize that they're going to have to pay these kids and they're going to have to give them a share of the revenue. And I think that's probably why they're trying to expand so much. So to get the last couple brands in. I do understand Spartan Dog's concern. I get that I would hate to see, anything happen to, Michigan State or Rutgers or any of these the Purdue's of the conference. Part of me, I just don't think it's going to happen. I think the Big Ten and the SEC are safe. I think that basically whoever got on those trains. And that's just my opinion on it. And I think they made it in, and I think they're going to be in that 48 team, whatever it is. I think that there's only a few really major brands left when you think about like Notre Dame and Florida State and a couple other schools here and there. I think those are going to get picked up, and it does suck for somebody who loves watching college football as much as I do. I have, around me right here, I have 4 TVs down here, and I watch a lot of games on Saturday. And, and a lot of, there's Big 12, there's ACC, there's SEC. I mean, I got them all on. And, so yeah, it's going to suck not getting to watch some of those games, because I am a college football junkie. I do like all that stuff, and watching all the games, I get total enjoyment out of it. But times are changing on that, and I'm just trying to stay positive on it and optimistic. And I think that, but I do think the Big Ten and the SEC are probably going to force the issue. I didn't think it was going to be sooner. I was definitely thinking it was going to be later, but I don't know. This is starting to seem like it's gotten some real momentum on it that, by the 2026, when they go to redo that deal, I mean, it could be, I think the SEC and the Big Ten are going to be trying to force a lot of different issues on those tables to some of these other teams and some of these other conferences.
Yeah. If I can just jump in real quick,
yep.
And I appreciate what you're saying, Mike. I want to just circle back. JR, you were talking about we've got to get the power away from the TV execs and get a commissioner. That's so pivotal. And honestly, I think a lot of conference realignment would not have happened if you actually had a commissioner like being in charge. Because I think Mike, SD, you guys have mentioned it. I'm just gonna reiterate it. We're probably gonna say it every episode. The NCAA stinks. That's my and part of the reason why is they're so reactive. And so who jumps in? Well, it's TV execs. Well, there's so many issues with that. Like just the potential for corruption. Like ESPN owns the rights to the SEC and they own the rights to the playoff. And it's a playoff selection committee. There's a reason why people thought that Alabama, was unfairly let in. And I'm not trying to send any ideas that it was corrupt this year, but you can see why people go there. And so the sooner we get somebody to be more of an overseer that's not a TV exec, the better.
Yeah, we have a lot of great comments in here. I wish we could get to all of them, but I'll get to this one because it's most prudent for what we're discussing right now. We had something, it was called the NCAA. It was killed by greedy athletic directors from blue chip programs. Dave could not have said it better myself. The NCAA was a greedy organization that was influenced by many other greedy athletic directors at many different programs. But at the end of the day, they failed at their job, and it started with NIL, and then it continued with the transfer portal, and now the NCAA has basically become irrelevant in many ways. And so obviously they still hold some power in the game from here and there, but as far as NIL goes, just look at the Tennessee case that's going on, and the NCAA has little to no power over NIL, things like that going on. And it's time for a change. It's time for somebody to be in charge of college football who is just in charge of college football. We don't need somebody who's in charge of every athletic program out there. That's too much. Just be in charge of college football, because women's gymnastics is not the same as men's college football. That's not disparaging gymnastics. I think all of these Olympic sports are fantastic additions and something that college athletes need to participate in. But yeah, it's not going well. So thanks for listening to the Big Ten Huddle. Please do like and subscribe. We appreciate that. If this was your first time listening, we are the Big Ten Huddle. We cover all things Big Ten football and basketball. We have a long episode every Sunday, Tuesday, and Wednesday night, all at 9 o'clock. So come in, check us out, get in the chat, let us know what you're thinking. We would love to have you join us and learn more about the Big Ten.